The Echo Farm, Chapter 1. Buffering. The morning the world stopped making sense, I woke to the sound of a notification that didn't come from any device I owned. It had that familiarly illicit pitch, the bell you hear in an empty room when you've been staring at the same video thumbnail too long, the pluck of a string in a throat you didn't know was there. It was shaped like a sound, and it slid out of the apartment walls and under the sheets. I sat up, sweating, with the taste of pennies behind my teeth. The apartment was a gesture of domesticity, not the thing itself. I had a bed, a chair, 2 cups, 1 plate, a coffee maker that spat water in an impatient rhythm. The walls were white with the faint gray of glued posters past not mine, previous tenants who had believed in decor long enough to leave ghosts. The window viewed a parking lot with a lamp that never turned off. My job was to watch. They called it content review, where I signed the papers, but in our chat we called it the Echo Farm. Farm was a joke because nothing grew. Echo was not a joke. I was paid to sit for 8 hours and watch videos in a queue, algorithmically sorted by some machine that knew more about what people wanted than their families did. I was paid to click a box. Allowed divided by remove, divided by escalate. I didn't choose the categories. I only watched. It was my contribution to the civilizational membrane, my turn at the window, my hand on the floodgate. The notification tone came again, and the coffee maker clicked off with a spasm, steam faltering. I held my breath. A bird screamed on the power line outside. The sound was not in the room. It was in me. I could feel it thrumming in my jaw. I realized, after a minute of listening, that the tone had mapped itself onto the shape of my name, 3 syllables that the HR manager had rehearsed when she hired me. Mar-I-N. It felt like an echo from a source that was my own mouth. I shook it off, pulled on a sweatshirt with a neckline biting from too many washes, and sat at the small desk with my employer's laptop open to the portal. I typed my password the way I always did, as if coaxing a dog. Slow, careful, persuasive. The queue loaded. The head count, 387 items awaiting review. The timer in the sidebar, 0 hours. The task stream, calibrate. The thumbnail of the first video. A girl's face with her eyes shut. A caption reading, proof we are all in the same dream. It had 2.2 million views. I clicked, obeying the instruction to watch at least 30 seconds. Her name was Cyan Dreamer, and her lips moved as if in prayer, but no sound came out. The video was 30 seconds of her silent face. I hovered the pointer, waiting for speech, for meaning. It ended. The algorithm recommended another video, naturally. What the silence told me then, don't scroll if you're alone, and then a compilation titled Videos That Made Me Feel Seen. The comments scrolled faster than I could read. The silence was full of sentences I couldn't hear. I clicked allow because there was nothing to remove. As I watched, the sound returned. Not from the video, not from the laptop, from somewhere behind my face. The bell that spelled my name twice, then a flotation of aftertone. I touched my temple and found no fever. I remembered the handwriting clinic in the 3rd grade, when the teacher drew my name on the board with a chalk squeal and told me to practice loops for 30 minutes, like copying would teach me to belong to those letters. My bell went Mar-I-N the way the teacher did. I typed in the chat, anyone else hearing weird system tones? No one answered. The text hung there like a shirt on a line. Video 2 in the queue. A man in a baseball cap points at the camera, telling the audience that everything you see has already happened, That time is a hallway, and we are walking backward through the only lighted part. Proof, he said, and lifted his left wrist, a scar in the shape of a fish. I dreamed this scar before I had it, he said, in a voice like a foghorn lost in fog. The comment spilled, same. I dreamed my grandma before she died. This is true science. I clicked escalate, indicating conspiracy divided by harmful information. With an educated hand, I had been trained to see this like a radiologist sees tumors. The training slides had bright yellow caution triangles with pixelated exclamation marks. In the chat, a moderator named BYRD replied to my earlier question, if you're hearing bells, it's probably no bell. I didn't get the joke. He added an emoji I didn't recognize, an ear with wings. My supervisor's avatar popped up in the corner like a priest behind a confessional grate. Marion, remember to mark calibration tasks after 10 videos. Target bias alignment. Her real name was Dolly, but we all called supervisors by whatever name they appeared under. Dolly had the habit of ending her sentences just before the end, as if punctuation was heavier than she could lift. Don't over-escalate, she had said a week earlier, after I had removed a string of videos showing teens pretending to faint. We are not here to save the world. I told the bell to shut up. It didn't. It changed register, went low, a subwoofer level hum that made the room ripple slightly. The window glass trembled. I checked the blinds. No wind. I placed my hand on the wall and felt nothing. I had the sensation of being inside a video. I had the sensation of someone watching me watch. Audience all the way down. The queue did not care. It had scenes from a mall security camera, a boy lifting a candy bar, a woman dancing in an empty corridor, an old man at a display of phones tapping the screen so gently it looked like rosary. It had a series of clips of a bus at a stop, the bus doors opening and closing, no one getting on. It had a man live streaming himself falling asleep, the chat begging him to wake. I realized, at the 20th video, that silence was now a genre and not a gap. People were filming rooms without noise and claiming the silence said things to them. In the comments, there were transcripts of the silence, as if across millions of microphones, the quiet was the same phrase. When I was 9, I tried to record silence. I had a cassette recorder Dad let me borrow. I was certain that if I could just tape the quiet of my room, I could prove to my mother that sometimes things were okay. I pressed record and sat on the carpet with my knees under my chin. The tape hissed. After 3 full minutes, I rewound and pressed play. Even on my cheap speakers, the room echoed back to me like an ocean in a small shell. Something had breathed in that room besides me. I used to think that I would write a book about this, about the way silence in the suburbs could kill things with politeness. Then I discovered that you can watch a book length of videos about silence being meaningful while the voice in your head says, at a steady pace, you are late, you are always late. The bell behind my face was steadying. Every time a clip ended, it sounded once like a metronome. On the 45th video, I encountered myself. It was not me. Not literally, but there she was. A woman with my haircut and my anxious collarbones and the exact shape of the mole under my left eye, reversed as if in a mirror. Her caption read, I finally heard it. She stared into the lens with a gentleness that made me want to close the page. Then she mouthed something. I raised the volume. Nothing. Her lips formed syllables without force. Ma-re-ann, my name. She pointed above her head, as if to indicate a figment just out of frame, and began to cry soundlessly. Over her tears, You could see the shape of her tongue as she tried to say, again, my name. I paused the video. The bell sounded once, then again, impatient now. The room tilted. I let my eyes fall closed and slid my palms up and down my jeans. When I looked again, the video had replaced itself with a recommended clip of a fireplace burning with a caption, "Sit with me for 3 minutes." I refreshed. The woman had no channel. The link now pointed to a man teaching how to replace a dishwasher hose. The algorithm had swallowed her back into whatever throat it kept those anomalies in. I sat, hands limp, feeling ridiculous. If I asked Dolly about it, she'd paste the corrective language, "coincidental resemblance," and "our system does not target individuals or simulate their biometric data," and "trust that the queue is curated by complex processes beyond any single user's perspective." In the chat, someone new arrived, box icon, no avatar. The handle, help desk. It was a used handle. Support hopped among them. "Heads up," help desk wrote. "We're seeing a sound bug that pings some users after silence videos. It's harmless. We're deploying a fix." The word "harmless" slid across my screen like a slug. I typed back, "Is it supposed to play inside my head?" The ellipsis appeared. Someone was typing a reply. It vanished. Helpdesk wrote instead, "Close divided by reopen your queue if experiencing audio anomalies. Also, hydrate." By habit, I obeyed. The queue shut down. The laptop screen went black, except for a single reflection. Me, flattened to a sheet, my outline a smudge in a void. My heart thumped in my throat. I poured water into a glass and paused with the tap running. The bell sounded faintly over the plumbing. When I lifted the glass to drink, the water within it jittered as in an old movie of a dinosaur approaching. I set it down and realized my hands were shaking. I put my palms on the table until the tremor translated into the wood. I didn't used to be a coward. I used to climb onto the roofs of houses under construction and sit with my legs over the gutter while the suburban grid stretched away all these good little lives like cells in a spreadsheet. I used to run at night just to feel my lungs burn, to find the edges of my body in the dark. Somewhere between 26 and 33, I became a person who obeyed chat directives in the middle of a panic and named the panic HR words like stress or burnout because they sounded administrative, solvable. I kept my head down and I let the machine tell me about my own day. I reopened the portal. The queue flashed, loaded, presented me a new first item, a thumbnail of a kitchen at 3 a.m., lit by the glow from a fridge door. Caption, "What was that?" I clicked. The video was static. A clock in the background read 3:11. The frame was empty. Then, as the seconds ticked, a shadow crossed the visible hallway, slow as cold syrup. I leaned in. The shadow was my size, my gait, a film of myself moving across another person's kitchen. My chest constricted. I moved the video back 3 seconds and forward again. Did I imagine it? I pictured Dolly's corrective language again, the phrase she relished, perception bias. My echo bell went off twice. I marked the video aloud. What else could I do? The comments had already decided. "It's you," wrote one. "We're all there." Another. A third wrote, "I see my own mother in the reflection." The next clips were quick cuts of people asleep while the camera shook, hands pressed against glass doors, an empty stadium with the scoreboard flickering home. It felt like a ritual. Hold up your quiet to the internet and let the internet answer that quiet with a million hot breaths. I clicked, 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 a ritual of my own, my fingers sore. It was an endurance test written by no one. It was a liturgy. When noon came, I broke protocol and left my chair. There is no one to report you if you walk around your own apartment, but I still knew I was being timed. I microwaved a bowl of soup until its surface quivered, ate it standing up. I checked my phone and found a text from my mother that I had missed the night before. "Call me when you can." That sentence carried its signature, maternal weather, the kind that makes you forget the season. I did not call. The last time, she had told me, "Your cousin Tasha is on the internet too much," followed by 27 seconds of silence that were a trap I fell into every time, leaping in to fill the void. I would not leap today. I placed the phone face down. The bell went off once. A judgment. I returned to the queue. Help desk had pinned a message to the top. Bug resolved for most users. If you still hear phantom tones, clear your cache divided by log a ticket. I entered my password again. The portal blinked, as if embarrassed, and then rendered a white page. In the white was a single line of black text, crisp as a scalpel. "Marion, do you remember the pond?" I stared. The chat lit up with questions. Others were seeing something too, but not this. Pine shows a dog on a scooter ad. Someone else, mine's blank. Dolly, do not share screenshots of internal tools. Help desk, ignore any content not in a signed queue format. Likely extension conflict. I scrolled to where there was nowhere to scroll. The text stayed in the center like a pupil. I whispered to the room, "I do." The word snuck out like a burglar. The bell did not sound. The apartment heard me. When I was 14, there was a pond behind the junior high where the cattails made a hedge against the road noise, and if you hid there, you could listen to frogs for an hour and miss homeroom. I hid there twice a week. My father had begun to take his dinners in the garage, yelling at the news like it could hear him, as if volume could purchase you a place in the conversation. The pond was the only proof that softness could have a climate. A boy named Leon found me there one afternoon and sat exactly one arm's length away. He said nothing for 30 minutes. At the very end, he told me he was leaving town and asked if he could borrow a word from me to take with him. I asked which one. He said, "The way you say the word nearly when a thing is almost true." We shook hands like strangers. He left, and later I read that he died in a different state near a different pond. Nearly is the word I still use when I can't stand the weight of is. The portal blinked again, and the queue returned, as if someone had lifted a curtain and found me. I was ready to label this a visual migraine. That would be the permissible explanation, but the text had known the pond the way only I knew it. Perhaps I had typed the word somewhere as an aside, and the algorithm had seized it. Perhaps I had told someone and forgotten. Perhaps this was nothing but my skull growing a new corridor. The next video flagged for graphic content divided by medical. I braced. It was a clip of a tooth extraction done at home, an idiot in a bathroom with pliers. The blood was his attempt at a sacrament. I watched with my jaw clenched until the clip ended, clicked remove, attached a note about harm. In the chat, the ear with wings emoji flapped past. The bell was quiet now, replaced by a hush with its own weight. It pressed on my chest like a sibling. It wanted me to lie down. On the 10th such video I stood up and did. The carpet scratched my ear. The ceiling was not high, but it was indifferent. I closed my eyes and imagined the pond with the cattails bending like old men. If I named it, Would it come? If I typed the word into a box, would it archive me? There comes a point in hours like this when the self becomes an account you manage rather than a thing you are. You reset it. You log in. You forget the answers to its security questions. My security questions were absurd. What is the first lie you told? What was the last book you promised to write? Who did you pretend to be when you wanted to be loved? I stared at the ceiling and tried to remember the correct answers. I must have slept a moment. I woke to the sound, not the bell, not the hum. A voice, not behind my face, but in the room. It said clearly, the way an automated line does, "Are you there yet?" I sat up too fast, and the blood unspooled behind my eyes in lots of black dots. The window showed the same lot, the same unturned lamp. I whispered, "Where?" And the voice did not answer. The laptop creaked, as if settling into a new temperature. On the screen, the queue had advanced to a video that had not yet been created. The timestamp read 6 minutes in the future. The thumbnail was of my door. The caption read, "I promise I'm friendly." My mouth filled with metal. The knock came soft. Once, then twice. 3 syllables. My name? There is a way to open a door that announces what you believe about the world. A pious opening, an angry flinging, a miserly crack. I put my hand on the chain lock and heard a voice I recognized whisper in the corridor, "It's me." Leon died when we were 17, the police said, because he had fallen asleep while driving. The car went quiet against a tree. I had not heard his voice since. He was alive, then dead, then reorganized into the whisper through my door, which took his shape the way a puddle takes the moon's. It's not magic, it's arrangement. He had said, "It's me," the way he had at the pond, not as a declaration but a question, like the test you take to become a person in someone else's life. "Who is me?" I asked the door. A laugh, mouth against wood. "I'm buffering," the voice replied. "It'll be more clear in a second." I never knew metaphors could knock. I never knew grief could learn new tenses. I opened the door. The hallway was empty, as if the building had made itself small, drawing back its garments to reveal the spine beneath. No one stood on the threshold. Downstairs, someone's baby cried. Upstairs, a vacuum complained about its job. I stepped over the threshold like a person crossing into a new era without shoes. On the floor near the door was a paper envelope. It had no stamp and no address. It knew where it was going. My name was written on it in my own handwriting. The loops exaggerated as if I had been practicing for an audience. I carried it into the living room and sat on the rug, cross-legged, like a child in a circle facing a teacher. Inside the envelope, which opened with the exact sound of my bell, I found a single Polaroid photo of my face, looking up. The timestamp in the corner read, "Last summer." In the photo, my mouth is open as if to receive a word. In the sheen of my eyes, if you magnify, there is a small shape reflected. A pond, or a kitchen, or a door. In the bottom margin, a handwriting that is not mine had written, "Do not report this." The laptop chimed. "Dolly." "Marion, check in." I typed, "Here." She replied, "We are piloting new context prompts for reviewer wellness. If you see messages addressed to you, do not engage. Standard queue continues. All is well." My throat made a dry sound that could have been a laugh if I were another person. All is well is what people say when the house is on fire and you are the house. The queue had moved onward. The next thumbnail was another silent face, another caption, "I saw me in her." The comment count was growing like mold. I took a breath, the kind that goes down too far and scrapes, and clicked play. The face in the clip was my mother's, but decades younger, 23 maybe. The way she looks in the one photo she allowed of herself on the mantel, standing in a dress like a field of bees. She sat in a room I did not recognize. Lighting modern, colors cool. She looked straight through the lens, and for a moment I believed she could see me there, in my white-walled apartment with the stupid coffee maker and the slat of dead light. She mouthed my name and then said, clearly enough for my lips to read even without sound, "Stop watching. Come home." And I paused with the spacebar pressed, as if my thumb could flatten time. I have not called her in 3 weeks. I have not been home in 6 months. Home is a word that kept getting heavier and heavier until I dropped it and pretended it was gone, like a person dropping a dumbbell at the gym and walking away, whistling. Now the dumbbell had rolled back like a pet and sat at my foot and barked. In the hall, the building sighed in its joints. The baby downstairs had settled. The lamplight outside kept on, patient as geology. The queue waited for me to be myself. And there, in the polyester silence that had draped itself over the city, I had the strangest sensation that there were eyes behind mine. Not in a mystical sense, in the way that screens leave an imprint on anyone who falls asleep with them open. In the way that the algorithm is patient, and when it cannot find you in the world, it reconstructs you out of your hungers. I had taught it my appetite. It was, in turn, teaching me my shape. I closed the laptop. The room was loud with blood. The bell returned not the same tone as morning, not a ping, but the long, low foghorn of a ship in the dark, moving forward, confident that someone else would get out of the way. I stood, and the room stood with me. I went to the sink and let the water run. I texted my mother, "I'll call tonight." I set the phone on the counter like a talisman. I returned to the envelope and slid the photo back inside. On the back, in faint pencil, a sentence I hadn't seen before revealed itself when I bent the paper against the light. It said, in my own exact, sharp S, "Don't trust the captions." I slept badly, head on the table, 2 hours of dream like a video buffering 10 seconds, then pause, then 10 seconds. In one segment, I was a kid again at the pond, and Leon told me that frogs were the sound of the earth remembering its name. In another, I stood on a stage and told the audience to please silence their phones, then added, "And your internal notifications, if you can find them." The audience laughed, the way audiences laugh when they want to be recorded doing it. When I woke, dusk had smeared itself across the parking lot. My laptop's battery light pulsed like a heart that is doing its best. I opened it and stared at my reflection hovering over the queue. I hit resume. The next video loaded. A corridor. A series of identical doors, the carpet patterned with forgettable leaves. The caption read, "Third floor, blue line, knock 3 times. I recognized the carpet. It was my building. The new tenants' videos were always obvious, the smell of fresh hope, and the angle of the phone. The clip walked down the hall and stopped at my door. The camera tilted, as if the person holding it had noticed the peephole winking. The caption bloomed a new line. "Answer if you hear your name." The knock came, the exact rhythm. Somewhere inside my chest the ship put on more speed. I stood up, and the apartment pressed its hand to the small of my back as if to guide me to the door. I did not ask who I was expecting. I did not decide whether to label this aloud, or remove, or escalate. I put my hand on the chain. I heard the whisper. This time it said, "Nearly." The word landed in me like a coin dropped down a well. On its descent, it touched every ledge of memory I had, wringing out the shape of a childhood I'd refolded to fit inside an adult drawer. "You waited," the voice said, "long enough." I undid the chain. I turned the lock. I opened the door. Chapter 2. Latency. There was someone in the hall. At first, my eyes refused to settle on her, as if my apartment and the corridor were arguing about jurisdiction. The figure shimmered like heat above asphalt, but when I focused, there she was. A girl in an oversized hoodie, the color of drowned mint, phone face down in her palm like a sedated animal. She was my age from a distance and a decade younger up close. She had a nose ring that looked expertly indecisive and a tiny bruise on her throat the size of a prayer. It was the kind of bruise you can only get from practicing being brave with the wrong teacher. "I'm friendly," she said, like the caption. The hallway bulb flickered once and then committed to a steady burn. I became aware of my bare feet on the gritty carpet and the fact that the chain was in my other hand, a piece of jewelry I had briefly mistaken for proof. She glanced at the chain and smiled without her eyes. "You're Marion," she said. "You're buffering," I said before I could stop myself. She laughed, and the laugh tried to leave the floor and succeeded, briefly. "I'm Cyan," she said. Somehow, of all the possible names, it was that one. Like the color or the dream. I stood back to let her in, and immediately the air changed, like it sometimes does when two frequencies interfere and produce a third tone that is more than the sum of the first two. The room became aware of us. The coffee maker clicked as if clearing its throat. She stepped over the threshold and looked around as if absorbing an inventory. 2 cups, 1 plate, a bed for one person who lies at the edge, a window that refuses to tell the time. "I saw your face," she said, not facing me. In the comments, they call it ghosting when your face shows up where it shouldn't, but it's not a ghost if the living are the ones reproducing. I didn't know how to be a host. I gestured at the chair like that was a sentence. She sat without breaking eye contact with the room. I stood behind the chair and tried not to grip it so hard the wood changed shape. "You knocked 3 times, you said nearly," I said, trying to be the one who names the rules. Cyan slid her phone onto the table. The screen woke as if embarrassed to have been caught napping. A live video window showed my hallway as it had looked 3 minutes earlier. Slightly grainy, slightly cruel. No comments yet. The caption read, "3rd floor, blue line, knock 3 times." She tapped to end the stream. The video saved itself with a grin like a fitted sheet trying to fold. "I post in bursts," she said. "People like to feel like the exhale is coming. You came to my door because the door was the next thing." The bell behind my face chimed once, like 2 coins clinking together in a coat pocket. I thought of Leon at the pond asking to borrow a word because he didn't trust his. Cyan watched me hear it, and something in her relaxed. "So you hear it too," she said. "They told me I was being dramatic, as if the internet could make a noise in your bones." He said diamond. "Help desk says it's a harmless bug," I said. "Help desk would call a knife a fork if it thought that would persuade you to eat the blade." I made the mistake of smiling. She noticed. "It's okay," she said, softer. "I do 2 tones, jokes and extraction." We were silent for a moment, the kind of silence that feels like a porch during lightning. The air cooperates with the storm because it's easier than resisting. "You posted a video this morning," I said. Your lips moved but no sound came out. I didn't say, You mouthed my name. She tilted her head. A lot of people posted that video. You looked like me. Everyone looks like everyone once the software sets the expectations. And it should have irritated me the way she skated from sentence to sentence without putting weight on the blades, but what I felt was illegible and had to be carried by my hands. I wanted to ask what brought her to my building beyond the caption of her own stream. I wanted to ask if she meant to say my name. I wanted to ask how old she was and what she had promised herself she wouldn't be and which promises she had already broken. I stood instead in the familiar pose of a person who believes the questions are traps, hands behind back, chin tilted to suggest understanding without inviting intimacy. I work the cue, I said. I'm not supposed to. I gestured, and the gesture covered the parts of my life I was ashamed of. I'm not supposed. I know, she said. That's why I came. You can see the things that pretend they're ordinary. Is there a point to this? I heard myself ask in Dolly's exact, gentle removal voice, and the shame hit me then, straight in the forehead, like a thrown stone you only notice once it's already in your skin. Cyan shrugged. She pulled her hoodie sleeve over her wrist and twisted it into a rope. A stitched blue line ran along the seam. I think you left something, she said, and the algorithm patterned me into the shape of your errand. What did I leave? Gone. She pointed at the envelope on the table, at the handwriting that belonged to me but didn't. That, she said. You and maybe your mother. The world shifted a half-inch. The envelope looked like a small white animal that had wandered into the wrong climate. I told myself that if it were an actual animal, I would know what to do. Pick it up, warm it, put it back. But it was only a message. Don't trust the captions, I said, to prove I'd read the warning. So why should I trust yours? She nodded as if I had gotten the test answer right. Exactly, she said. So I didn't caption the last thing. I just brought it. She tugged a second envelope out of her hoodie pocket. No stamp, no address. My name again. The loops had straightened this time, like someone had scolded my handwriting into adulthood. There was a small smear on the corner that could have been grease or rain. Where did you get this? I asked. From my mother, she said. Who got it from a man at a pawn shop? She added. Who said a woman left it there with a note that read, Deliver when you see her. He said he'd know the face. The face is the ad. My mother would never go to a pawn shop, I said reflexively, then heard the wrong tense in my certainty and corrected it without correcting it. She would never have gone. Hey, dear, everyone goes where they said they wouldn't. Eventually, Cyan said, not unkindly. We're all just roots. The window insisted on being a painting of a night you can't enter. I picked up the envelope. It didn't open itself this time. My name on it made me feel like a house that has to recognize its own front door. What's in it? Cyan asked, with careful boredom the way a nurse asks a question you can't answer wrong. I slid a finger under the flap. The sound it made was the bell's domestic cousin. Inside, a folded page, the kind that belongs in a school binder, blue lines, margin printed in a pink that never quite grips the paper. I unfolded it with both hands. It was a photocopy of something handwritten. The ink had bled in places where the original writer had pressed too hard, turning letters into black constellations. At the top, my mother's handwriting, insisting itself into legibility. To Marion, do not call first. The rest was a letter. Not long, not short. It used my name 3 times as if invoking it would normalize the act. It asked if I remembered the pond and if the cattails still kept their own counsel. It said she had kept something for me because she believed I would always come home to ask for it, and that if she delivered it sooner, it would be nothing more than a story and not a tool. It did not say what the thing was. Under that, in a different hand, Leon's, it was unmistakable, his lowercases too low, his capitals like someone trying to keep a kite from the wind. He wrote, "You said let's wait until the silence says go. Consider this the go." It was dated August of the year after he died. Unless this was a joke the universe had paid the universe to pull on me, the dead were writing me their return addresses. "You know him?" Cyan asked, reading my face the way people read clouds when they think the sky is sending a themed message. "He died," I said, which was accurate and cowardly. "He left this anyway." The room bent. The letter smelled like toner and something warmer. I folded it back. The envelope held a second object, a small SD card taped to a Post-it note. The note said, in my mother's handwriting, "Don't upload until you've called me. Don't call until you've listened. Don't listen with speakers. Headphones," Cyan said, like the answer to a riddle. I didn't own good headphones. I owned a pair I had bought at a gas station the week my father decided that the living room would be a war, the kind that only his voice could win. The earbuds had torn foam that clung to earwax like a lover to a last argument. I looked at them on the counter and felt the exact shape of my future and its wrongness. Cyan reached into her pocket and produced a pair of expensive-looking over-ears, the kind that folds into itself like a bug playing dead. "Trade," she said. "You can mail mine back when you're done. Or don't. The point of a ritual is not to return property. It's to prove the property was never yours." The bell chimed once, meaning, "Proceed." I slotted the SD card into the adapter in the company laptop, thinking, if this is a violation, punish me, and discovering a new pleasure in that thought. The file structure populated itself like a city seen from a plane at night lights, in clusters suggesting intent. There was a single audio file with a name like a dental chart, MJN 311 WAV. WAV, not MP3. Someone meant for this to be exact. I plugged in Cyan's headphones. She stood and drifted toward the window, offering me her back as privacy. I pressed play. First, of course, the hiss. Then the room tone, that distant field of unseen machinery that undergirds all modern experience. Then a small cough that was my mother's. Then, impossibly, Leon's voice, older than he was when he died and younger than I am now. "Okay," he said, the way people do when they are alone and need to convince themselves they have company. "Marion, this isn't the pond, but pretend it is. Listen to what the quiet is doing." I closed my eyes because my eyes are cowards. My body leaned forward in the chair without asking me. The hiss deepened. The quiet had a shape. It snuck up from underneath like a barge under a dock. Somewhere in the far back of the track, a rhythmic tapping 3 beats. Pause. 3 beats. The knock that had come to my door. My stomach went to the door by itself. "This is what we've figured out," Leon said, like he was remembering. "They thought we were being poetic. Cattails, frog choruses, whatever. But when we sat there for an hour not speaking, the same pattern repeated, and not like frogs or trucks on the highway. It repeated at the interval of a person who is trying to remember their name. We started hearing it everywhere after. In the gym HVAC, in the Aldi freezers, in the accident scenes. Once you hear it, you can't not. It's a kind of keypad. It's what everything uses to tell everything else it's still there. The sound in the file rose, then receded. It reminded me of that night on the couch when the baby downstairs had cried in his sleep and then forgotten why. Leon continued, almost giddy. I was going to run away with that noise like a musician with a stolen riff. But you said wait for the silence to say go. You were right. I left before the go, and I got gone. But that wasn't the message. The message is this. If you knock back, the world will answer. It will answer with a door where there was a wall. In I am dar, on the track, a test knock. 3 beats. The room replied, 3 beats. My skin did what dogs do when thunder visits. My scalp haloed, my teeth murmured an ancient insult. Cyan watched my reaction reflected in the window and turned so she wouldn't. My mother's voice entered, lower than I remembered, with a steadiness she had never spent on me. Honey, I told him to leave this where you'd find it. If you never do, that's also an answer. But if you hear it, call me, or wait for me to knock. If you don't want either, knock 3 times anyway on anything. It works in kitchens. It works in waiting rooms. It works better on the doors you haven't admitted exist. Hey, Ed on. The file ended with a click that meant someone had been cheap with tape. I opened my eyes to my apartment exactly as I had left it, except that now it was built around a frequency I could name. Cyan was standing on her toes at the window like she expected to see something new on the old lot. She dropped back on her heels and turned. Did it work? She asked. It worked, I said. The sentence was an underhand toss toward a moving target. In the videos, she said conspiratorially, the comments keep writing the same transcript of the silence like the silence is learning to write back. Everyone thinks they invented it. Everyone thinks their knock is bespoke. That's the trick. He had no have any. He had 9 with hillside 8. What trick? She pointed at my chest with 2 fingers, like a witch who doesn't want to make a show of it. The trick where the echo farm feeds on who we are when we think we're alone? I expected contempt in my mouth. There wasn't. There was affection, like the kind you feel for a stray that has survived by pretending to be a different animal every day until the pretense became a talent. The portal chimed. Dolly. Reminder. Calibrate. Help desk. If you are experiencing personalized messaging, it is not intended for you. Not intended for you, Cyan read over my shoulder, as if reading an epitaph, and maybe she was. That's the most personal thing a system can say and attain. Why did you come to the 3rd floor? I asked. How did you choose my door in a hallway of repeating doors? She smiled as children do in horror films when they need to demonstrate that innocence is a style choice. The blue line, she said, on the carpet. It's faint, but it's a seam, an edit. It runs under your door like a river. It's as if someone stitched your room into the building after the building was born. I had never noticed a line. I looked down. There it was if you wanted it to be, a slightly bluer thread woven into the beige grid that the landlord had probably chosen for its ability to hide both crimes and soup. It ran under my threshold and vanished into my place like an artery you don't know is yours until it bleeds. I have to call my mother, I said, because even I was tired of how long I had not. Do you? Cyan said, and I heard in it not disrespect but a hypothesis. Or does the calling happen if you go to the place where the call is already happening? The pond, I said. She shook her head. The laundromat, she said. Or the stairwell, or any place with tile. Echoes prefer tile. And you can leave in the middle of a cycle if you don't mind wet clothes. Why are you helping me? It came out a little like, Are you my enemy in a movie too earnest to admit its appetite? Because I need help, she said. She tapped her throat where the bruise was like a small fallen fruit. The silence told me something I'm not ready to know. And you work at the gate. Gatekeepers hear the knock different. I'm not a gatekeeper, I said. I don't even have keys. Cyan glanced at my laptop. You have the keys to other people's captions, she said. Same thing. The bell chimed dully, as if wrapped in cloth. I pictured the laundry room in the basement of my building. Machines like short gods with bruised halos of light. A bulletin board with notices nobody reads but everyone reads the absence of. The last time I went there, a woman was asleep on a dryer, her hand inside the open mouth of a pillowcase as if checking the dream for eggs. Come, Cyan said. Make your call where the announcement has no stage. Downstairs, the elevator hummed in the bad mood elevators have when they know they're the only one. We took the stairs instead. The stairwell was the kind of architecture a building makes to prove it doesn't care if you leave. Cyan walked one step ahead like a scout. In the second-floor landing, an exit sign buzzed like a rehearsed fly. We passed a door with a handwritten note. Do not disturb divided by you will regret it. Cyan smiled at that as if being warned was a compliment. The laundry room was vacant except for two machines grumbling like old cousins. The light made everything look like the inside of a refrigerator at 2A. Cyan perched on a folding table, an acrobat refusing the last centimeter of air. I stood between two washers like a referee about to invent a new game. Knock, she said. I looked at the nearest machine's sheet metal side. I thought of my mother telling me to call when I could, and of my father yelling so the couch would feel useful, and of Leon pronouncing the word nearly like a promise he could keep if he didn't pronounce the last letter. I raised my knuckles to the machine like a Christian to a saint's reliquary. I knocked 3 times. The sound translated itself into the room with the enthusiasm of an immigrant. Silence. Then 3 knocks from the far wall. Not the machine, the wall. Cyan's face bloomed with a very precise fear, the kind you rent because you can return it if it doesn't fit. She slid off the table and stood behind me, as if I were a large animal she had decided to bet on. Ask it something, she whispered. What do you ask a noise? I whispered back. Ask if it is yours. I cleared my throat because dealing with the invisible makes me formal. Are you mine? I asked the wall. Knock, knock, knock. I let my breath out and didn't remember when it had begged to be kept. Yes, Cyan translated, and the translation seemed fair. Ask it where, she said. Where are you? I said to the paint, which had begun to look like water under a wind. Knock. Pause. Knock, knock. Not here, Cyan said, delighted. Or maybe not just here. I didn't want to ask the next thing. I asked it anyway. Are you my mother? My voice failed to be manly enough to make this a joke. Knock. Knock. Pause. No, Cyan said gently. Or, not only. I placed my palm on the wall and felt, through gypsum and the throbbing pipes behind it, a pulse that could have been mine or the building's or the planet's private habit of surviving. I knocked one more time because I wanted to know whether my want had weight. The wall replied from slightly to the left, a door, if you believed in patterns. Cyan stepped to the left, her sneaker squeaked. She laughed, startled to find that her body had a sound. If you push, she said, not moving closer. I pushed. The wall didn't give. Of course it didn't. It was a wall. I looked for a seam like the one in the carpet. It wasn't visible unless you forgot how to look. I forgot. The seam appeared. A hairline fracture in the paint where someone had painted a door into a wall and called it aesthetic. You don't have to, Cyan said, sounding like my mother when she tried to give me permission in the voice of a stranger. I know, I said. My knuckles brushed the paint. It was dry and somehow damp. The bell sounded in my head like a key turning in a lock that belongs to a house you haven't purchased yet. I pressed again, and the wall made a sound like a person revising a sentence. It wasn't a door. It didn't swing. It flexed. It adapted to the idea of passage. The seam widened enough for someone to put a hand through. I did. There was air on the other side, and the air had the temperature of a pond at noon in June when you stick your arm in and pretend that the cold is your idea because you chose it. I pulled my hand back. It was wet. The wet smelled like summer and old pennies. Your mother, Cyan said, as if we were choosing a destination in a rideshare app. Or Leon, or both, or neither, or the thing that learned to answer you. The letter says, "Don't upload until I call," I said, because my loyalty to rules is not something I know how to abandon. I only know how to violate it cautiously, with documentation. So call, Cyan said, and extended her phone to me with the number pad open, as if handing over a weapon to someone who had declared themselves nonviolent. I typed my mother's number without looking. My thumbs remembered it like scripture. The ringback tone played the first bar before skipping like a record in a moving car. She answered on the second ring, the way people answer when they have been sitting in a chair waiting to deserve the future. "Marion," she said, and her voice suddenly made the laundry room into a childhood kitchen, the kind where the table wobbles and nobody fixes it, because wobble is the real table, and the food feels more earned when you have to steady your plate. "Mom," I said. I wanted to add something that would turn this into a reunion rather than a confession. "I got your letter," I said instead. "Oh, good," she said. "I was worried it would be intercepted." "A joke and not a joke." "By who?" I asked, thinking of Dolly, of Help Desk, of Cyan's bruise. "By the part of you that thinks you don't have to want anything," she said. "Or by the machine that makes money off your refusal." "Where are you?" I asked. Because we had been taught by phones that location is the only thing that makes identity actionable. "Not there," she said. "Not just there. If you knock, I'll knock back." And then, before I could phrase all the ways that sentence made me 12 again, she said, "Listen." I held the phone away from my ear, but the sound on both sides was the same. In the laundry room, the wall knocked. On the phone, the same rhythm. Cyan's eyes widened in the simple joy of an experiment confirming itself. The room and the call had become the same event. "I can come," my mother said. "Or you can come. Or we can both stand where we are and let the door grow from the sound like a plant from a well." "What's behind it?" I asked, already understanding that question belonged to a version of me that had waited for certificates before crossing thresholds. "Behind what?" she said, and I realized she didn't know if I was in a stairwell or a field or a dream. Behind the habit of not knowing, the seam in the wall gaped just enough for the sound to be visible if you agreed that sound could be visible. Cyan pressed her palm flat, like testing bread dough for readiness. She mouthed, "Go to me," as if she were handing me my own word back. The bell inside me struck an hour that didn't exist on clocks. "Okay," I said into the phone to my mother, to Leon, to the wall, to Cyan, to the place in me that invents captions. "I'm coming." And the moment I said it, the door came closer to being a door, and the silence said, "Go in a voice that was my name. Chapter 3. Handshake. If the door had a handle, I didn't find it. It opened the way a throat does when it decides to swallow. Reflex first, consent after. Cyan stood a step behind me, not touching, a presence like a caption waiting to be placed. On the phone, my mother didn't say hush or hurry. She breathed in a way that made room. "Go ahead," she said, and it wasn't permission so much as accompaniment, the way two rowers time their pull without looking. The seam widened to the width of my shoulders. Cool air that smelled like pond water and oxidized coins slid into the laundry room and sat on my tongue. The machines, insulted to be demoted from central sound, lowered their pitch, the way a radio does when you drive under a bridge. Cyan nodded at the opening. "You first," she said, which I respected because it made a ritual out of fear instead of calling it by one of its PR names. I didn't step through. I leaned. It felt wrong to commit the feet before the head. On the other side, the floor was not tile or carpet. It was something like the packed mud at the edge of a body of water when August has taught it to be patient. The light was not light. It was a pressure that allowed sight. I thought of ultrasound, pictures made out of behaviors. "Keep the call on," my mother said, as if I had considered not, "so I can meet you halfway." I held the phone to my ear and ducked. My shoulder brushed the edge of paint, and a thin white line traced my sweatshirt, a chalk mark that chose me. I hadn't realized I was gripping the letter envelope until it bent. Cyan followed, folding herself along her own seam. The door offered space as if we were tailor's patterns that had always been measured for this garment. The wall flexed, then closed behind us with a tender sound that made me think of a mouth deciding not to say what would ruin everything. It was not a room, and it was not a room. Imagine a corridor that has forgotten which way is forward. Imagine a shoreline that brought its own small fog. The air was full of those particles you only see in beams, except there was no beam, only the idea of one. Underfoot, the ground kept the memory of cattails without having to display cattails. Ahead, something like a hallway extended, and off that hallway, doors where doors would be in a bureaucrat's fantasy, evenly spaced and numbered in a language you know until you try to read it out loud. The blue line from the carpet upstairs ran along the base, a vein or a stitch. It pulsed with a rhythm I recognized and did not. The knock translated into light. "Third floor," Cyan murmured loyally, as if reading an instruction manual in a place that did not believe in manuals. "Blue line. There are rules," my mother said through the phone, not as a scold but as a gift. "They're simple, and they will not save you, but they will let you navigate." "Okay," I said. Cyan's hand appeared next to mine, palm up, as if the word okay were a thing that could be placed into her. "Rule 1. My mother said, "If a door has your name, do not go alone. If you go alone, do not say your name. If you say your name, do not expect the person who answers to be you." The hallway opened like a book when she said it. 3 doors on the left, 3 on the right. The nearest door had a small metal plate where a name would go. Mine wasn't on it. The plate showed nothing at all, and then, when I blinked, refused to show even that. Cyan craned her neck. "Can doors be shy?" she asked. "Only when watched," my mother replied, as if she had been taught manners by an animal. "Rule 2. Never correct the captions on this side. They are someone's only way to continue." I touched the plate with my index finger the way you test a burner after someone has told you, "Idiot, it's hot." The metal was exact room temperature. My finger left a fog mark that became a letter M and then evaporated like a mood. From deeper in the corridor, a sound approached. A rolling oscillation, like a drone with asthma. Cyan took a step to the right, and I did too, because I didn't want to be the only person in the center of anything. The noise resolved into a cart. The cart pushed itself. It had a body of wire mesh and 4 wheels that squealed at different pitches. Inside, objects piled like a thrift store without shame. Someone's headphones, a plastic saint with the face rubbed off, a yellow legal pad, a switchblade in a sheath, a hairbrush full of gray hair, a doll's head, an unspooled cassette tape whose ribbon tried to read the floor, a disposable coffee cup with someone's lip print in mauve, a key ring with a key shaped like a question mark. The cart paused by us in expectation. "Don't take anything unless it belongs to you," my mother said, and the possessing pronoun tightened around my chest. I scanned the heap. My fingers brushed the headphones reflexively. Cyan's model, her folded bug. She reached, stopped. "Those are mine," she said, surprised to hear it out loud, and then didn't take them. "Look," Cyan whispered. Tucked under the pad, a Polaroid. Not the one from the envelope. Another. Me again. Different light. My head turned to the side as if listening, my hair in a style I do not wear. In the margin, the caption written in a hand that could have been mine in better weather. Upload to proceed. Rule 2. Never correct the captions here. But I didn't have to correct. I could disobey. I lifted the photo. The cart moved an inch away, offended. I flipped the picture over. On the back, a number, 5 digits, and a sentence. "Knock this." "Mom?" I said. "You can knock anything," she said. "Doors, numbers, names. But numbers respond fastest. They think in digits here." I knocked 5 digits on my thigh, translating the rhythm into contact. The corridor listened. The blue line pulsed in the same sequence and then steadied. From the door opposite us, a sound, not a knock but a clearing of throat, the universal human preparation to be witnessed. "Rule 3, my mother said. "If a door clears its throat, don't apologize for it." The door opened inward, inside, a room that looked like the waiting area of a clinic designed by an accountant. Chairs with backs too straight. A fish tank with no fish, only the filter grumbling like a widower. A bulletin board with no notices, only pins waiting patiently for the opportunity to hold on the far wall. A window that didn't open, and a view of nothing but the back of a screen. In the center of the room, a desk. Behind the desk, Dolly. Not Dolly, but yes, Dolly. The hair in the precise soft square. The mouth that loved ends of sentences, but was sent to war without them. Her name badge read Dolly, but each L had been inverted, so that if you stared, her name became an abstract pattern. She looked at me and smiled, the smile managers keep for people who require both warning and affection. "Marion," she said, "let's calibrate." Cyan made a small sound I would call a laugh if laughter weren't a currency we debased daily. She leaned toward my shoulder. "Is that her?" she whispered, and I didn't answer because the room made negative space around the whisper as if filing it. "I'm off shift," I said to Dolly. Ridiculous defense. "I'm not in the portal." Arrayed. "You're always in the portal when you think you're not," she said. She folded her hands. The desk was empty except for a single stack of forms and a single pen chained to a weighted base, the kind you have to fight with to sign your name. "We're piloting a context well-being initiative," she continued. to help you translate irregular exposures into operational languages. She's talking about the bruise, Cyan said. Her fingers worried the cuff of her hoodie into a tendril. Where is he? I asked Dolly. Leon, escalated, Dolly said. Pending moderator review. If you remove him, I said, or intended to say quietly. But the quiet here was not privacy. If you mark him harmful, we are not here to save the world, Dolly said, fitting the old phrase to a new coffin. We are here to keep the captions attached to the right faces. On the phone, my mother exhaled. The sound you make when someone you love has put their hand on a hot stove because they thought it was the only surface available. Rule 4, she said. If someone tells you their job is to protect names, ask them whose. I want to see a different door, I said, childish. That's not how calibration works, Dolly said, and her eyes softened as if she were applying lotion in a commercial in which the actress is paid to simulate relief. We brought the pond to you. Just sit. And, she gestured, I sat, because that is the talent that got me this far, willingness to be a good object. Cyan did not sit. She went to the fish tank and pressed her nose to the glass. The filter burped. You forgot something, she said to the tank, as if scolding it for the absence of life it had not promised to provide. Dolly slid the forms across the desk. The top said, bias, alignment, self-assessment. Under that, in smaller print, please rate your degree of attachment to the following constructs. The constructs were words like silence, mother, pond, door, dead, name, job. There was a Likert scale for each strongly disagree to strongly agree, and a box labeled comments. If you wanted to ruin your life on purpose, the font was a sans serif that tried to be kind. I'm not doing this, I said, but said it the way a child says it when they mean, please make me do this so I can blame you. Dolly nodded, full of mercy. Wonderful, she said. Refusal is a valid data point. She made a tick on a sheet I could not see. Now, listen to the following audio sample and indicate which of the 3 transcripts reflects your experience. She pressed a button under the desk. The room's sound changed. It is easy to make a room sound different. You only have to change what you expect from it. Hiss. Then the 3 knocks. Then the pause. Then 3 more. The same, but extended, like a theme elaborated by a composer who knows the audience wants both safety and surprise. 3 options appeared on the wall as text, the way old game shows used to show answers. A. Marion, do you remember the pond? B. I promise I'm friendly. C. All is well. Cyan raised her hand as if this were a class that rewarded time of air. Don't trust the captions, she said. There is no option D, Dolly said. Selecting D will be recorded as an error. I select D, Cyan said. We're not calibrating you, Dolly said. Not yet. Then calibrate me, Cyan said, voice flat, casing on. I'm the one with the bruise. Dolly looked at her as if she hadn't noticed a person in the room until now and found the oversight beneath her. You're a user, she said. Users participate by being valuable. Reviewers participate by handling the value. Everyone gets what they can hold. You don't hold anything, Cyan said to Dolly. Sweet as poison. And I wanted to put my hand over Cyan's mouth for her own sake, and also because I disagreed, and also because I agreed too much. The fish tank filter hiccuped. The cart in the hallway squealed, retreating. My mother spoke into my ear, private again. You can leave the room, she said. Through the door you came in, or the door you noticed when you weren't assigned to." "What door?" I whispered. "Exactly," she said. I looked around with the insecurity of a person at a party trying to spot the exit without announcing their boredom. The far left corner, where the baseboard had a scuff like a boot had bumped it too often, held a shadow that did not belong to any object. The shadow had the shape of a door if doors were honest about their desire to be mouths. Cyan saw me see it. She walked to the corner and did the least logical thing. She knocked on the shadow. The room heard that knock as betrayal. The overhead light dimmed to courtroom levels. Dolly's hand went to the underside of the desk in the choreography of summoning security. The wall knocked back, lazy, like a god who knows your devotion has nowhere else to go. "Rule 5, my mother said, voice calm through wire. "If there is any doubt, go toward the knock you made." I stood. Dolly stood. "Marion," she said, and for the first time the absence of punctuation did not feel like an affectation, but like a wound that would not clot. "We need you to stay in the seat. If you leave now, the system will consider you a variable. Variables are escalated," I said, and she closed her mouth because she had trained me too well. Cyan knocked again, faster. The shadow widened. The blue line along the baseboard brightened in a pulse that humiliated the room. I stepped around the desk, and Dolly, to her credit, stepped back, the way you step back from a feral dog that has decided your yard is not your yard. As I reached the corner, the phone against my ear cooled. My mother had gone quiet, the way she does when she believes she will ruin me or save me, and she is trying to choose the correct costume. I put my hand into the shadow, and it accepted my hand without debate. On the other side, a temperature that made my wrist remember a childhood fever and its ice bath. I glanced at Cyan. She nodded as if to say, "I told you the blue line was a river." We slid through the corridor again, or another one made from the same factory parts. Doors, the blue seam, the air that shows its dust proudly. Behind us, Dolly said our names in a voice that asked us to remember who pays the rent. Ahead, a different light fell across the floor, an amber that reminded me of kitchen bulbs after a storm has taken the sky hostage. The sound here was different too. Less hiss, more breath. A chorus of people trying not to disturb a sleeping animal. "At some point," my mother said, returning, "I will stop telling you rules, because rules have the habit of replacing the thing they meant to protect." "You can keep telling me," I said, "because commandments feel like love to those of us raised on report cards." "Rule 6, she said, and I smiled despite myself at the cornfield of it all. "You will meet yourself. Don't join her unless you want to be her." We passed a door on the right that had no plate and no hinges, and somehow looked more like a door than any door had ever accomplished before. I slowed. Cyan bumped my shoulder the way friends do to pretend to be enemies. We knocked, because we had become the kind of people who knocked at the world as if that act alone were literacy. The reply was a shout. "Come in." My voice, it wasn't eerie, only rude. I looked at Cyan. She lifted her eyebrows the way you do when you aren't going to stop someone from hurting themselves, but would like to be thanked afterward for not stopping them. I opened the door that didn't open. It parted the way fog parts when you are arrogant enough to walk through it like you're the weather's boss. Inside, my apartment. Not my apartment now. My apartment a year ago, when the coffee maker still believed in ambition, when I had a second fork because sometimes Leon would haunt me into buying one, when the window admitted morning like a rumor. On the couch, me, Legs under me, laptop open, the cue in early spring colors. I watched myself watch. "Hey," she said to me. She didn't look up. "If you're here to justify anything, don't. We're on a schedule." "What's the schedule?" Cyan asked. "Stepping in, stepping out, unwilling to commit. Uploads," she said. "Noon is the screaming, 3 is the dances, 6 is the funerals they call challenges. Midnight we save for silence, because that's when the drunk ones arrive." She laughed. It sounded like eating ice, aggressive then hollow. I knew this version of me. She was all function, no mother. She had said yes to every request because declining felt like a kink she wasn't nice enough to have. "Who sends you the letters?" I asked her. She looked up then, and the look wasn't congratulations or contempt. It was the blankness of someone who knows that curiosity is a form of stalled movement. "You're the one who writes," she said. "You're the one who remembers to stamp." "I don't," I said too fast. "I didn't attempt." "Then who did?" she said, and the room made space for my not knowing the way an elevator makes space for a dog in a stroller. By pretending this is ordinary because it's easier than admitting it's not, Cyan circled the room like a burglar, assessing whose life is worth stealing. She pointed at the Polaroid on the table, same as before, different angle. She pointed at the envelope with my handwriting needing a drink. "What happens if we take these?" she asked. "You can only steal from yourself here," my other self said, flicking at a crumb with a violence that embarrassed me. "You can't make a profit unless you want to live in the margin. Dorn. Rule 7, my mother said in my ear, and the number made me laugh at myself for wanting to count. If another you is comfortable, don't stay. If another you is bleeding, don't look away. Either way, keep your name in your pocket." "How?" I asked her, more sharply than she deserved. "How do I keep my name?" "You knock it smaller," she said, and that made a sense my mouth could carry. The other me closed the laptop finally, like someone tired of 2 mirrors. She studied me, and in her face I saw the gift and the wound of similarity, the urge to be kind to myself as a way to avoid being accurate. "You came to ask if there's a door that isn't metaphor," she said. "There is, but you still have to knock." "Where?" I said, and hated myself for depending. She pointed where I wouldn't have. Not the wall, not the floor. The space between the couch and the table, where your shin always finds the corner, where you curse and then apologize to furniture, where the invisible math of a room does its work. "There," she said, 3 times. "But before you do, remember something true that you never uploaded. Otherwise, you'll just get content." Cyan looked at me, hungry. Not for my secret, but for the act of a person choosing to have one. I thought of truthful things and their public cousins. I thought of the pond and the cattails and Leon's request and my mother's rules and Dolly's almost punctuation. I thought of the day my father stopped yelling because he had nothing left to aim his voice at, how the silence in the house then was worse than the noise because it asked us to produce our own weather. I thought of the morning after I moved into this apartment, when I took the second fork out of the drawer and put it in a shoebox because I could not bear the optimism of 2. "That one," Cyan said, reading my chin. I knelt. My knees cracked, a sound like a twig admitting its species. I knocked 3 times on the space where air lives when furniture pretends to be neutral. The blue seam flared under the rug. The room inhaled. The gap opened the way all gaps do, just enough to prove that a gap is a decision. On the phone, my mother said nothing, which is how people say I'm here when they know words would be theft. The gap showed nothing but invitation. The smell was pond. The temperature was waiting room. The feeling was a handshake. Your hand, my hand, let's agree for this second to be stronger together than against. Rule 8, my mother said, and I could hear the smile she had when she sang to no one. If you shake, mean it. I reached. Cyan put her hand on my back, a wordless contract. The other me watched with a look I could not name, envy braided with relief, braided with the ceremony of watching your replacement approach. Behind me, the algorithm, no, call it the echo farm, because that way we remember it grows things, even if crops fail, hummed somewhere inside its mountain. Ahead, the corridor of possibilities waited for the knock that would assign them purpose. I put my hand in. The space took it and gave it back as mine. Chapter 4. The Harmonic. The first thing through the gap was the part of me that believes in causes. It went scouting ahead like an earnest dog, sniffing for justifications. The rest of me followed without discussion. Cyan kept her palm between my shoulder blades, a little pressure that made my spine remember it was an antenna. The gap did not slam shut behind us. It closed the way a mouth closes around a word you don't want anyone else to steal. I expected the corridor again. What we entered was larger and closer. The air carried water the way a voice carries grief, saturated enough to persuade you that it will keep doing this forever. It was not the pond, not the laundry, not the clinic waiting room. It was a nave with its roof removed, and the ceiling beyond the missing roof was that late afternoon color you get when, in the minutes before a storm, the sky decides to stage a rehearsal with no audience. The floor was a geography of shallow. Inches of clear water sat on smooth concrete, and beneath the water someone had painted lines and arcs and numbers, as if the bottom of a drain pool had been reimagined as a music staff. Notes beyond understanding glimmered, then slid, the way minnows do when you think you've seen their whole body and then discover they have an afterthought. The blue seam from the corridor had widened here into a river that ran along the base of the walls. You could hear it think, "Wow," Cyan said, the word anyone uses when awe won't let them swear. She stepped into the shallow. The water climbed her sneakers like ambition. "It's a warehouse," she said, uncertain, then shrugged. "Or a choir." The choir was unseen. It was breath and a pressure in the bones that reminded me of long car rides with my father when he would turn the radio off because he believed conversation was a sport where only one team was allowed to score. "Marion," my mother said in my ear, softer now that the space itself had begun to speak. "You're almost in the right room. Don't lose your name on the way. Fold it smaller. Put it under your tongue." I curled my tongue against my lower teeth as if a word could be smuggled like contraband. Cyan waited 3 steps, then turned to check that I was not making the door my home. We went deeper by inches. The water never rose above the ankle. It made the mind believe in mercy. Ahead, a cluster of columns supported a roof that refused to appear. Between the columns, an arrangement of objects that, if you saw them on a table, would suggest a seance. If you saw them on a street, would suggest a yard sale with pretensions. 2 plastic lawn chairs faced each other as if they had been arguing. A folding table with a scar across its top held a cassette recorder, its buttons worn smooth. A reel-to-reel machine with spools like eyes waited to be fed. In the center of the space, a door with no frame stood upright, its bottom submerged so the water lapped at its threshold as if practicing pronunciation. On the door, a nameplate. It did not say Marion. It said, "Nearly." I put my hand on the air to balance and laughed once, Not because it was funny, but because the spine will choose laughter if it doesn't know whether it's allowed to call the feeling fear. Cyan stopped herself from clapping. "You get your wish word," she said, with the generosity of someone who misses no opportunity to be happy on another person's behalf. The door's knob was not metal. It was a circle of wood, carved, varnished, etched with rings like a tree's. I wanted to put my ear against it, and I did, because in this place the word want did not have to apologize for its sweaty hands. Inside, a sound like the hush you get when paper rubs against paper, a library of things that haven't admitted they're a fire hazard. "You can open it," my mother said. "But remember, Rule 6, I said, trying to be a good student. "Don't join her. Keep my name small." "That's not a rule," she said. "That's a posture." Cyan pointed at the reel-to-reel. "Can I?" she asked, already drifting toward it. "What happens if you do?" I asked. "It remembers us," she said. I turned the knob. The door opened like a throat again, an echo of the wall in the laundry, but drier, more articulate. The room beyond was my mother's kitchen, in a version of our house that happened 5 years ago in an August that will keep happening. The table, the wobble, the ceramic rooster that pretends to know about mornings, the taped recipe for a cake no one ever made because we were always out of eggs, the window above the sink framing a rectangle of backyard where a grill rusted itself into an idea. My mother sat at the table with her hands around a mug the color of a bruise before it blossoms. She looked at the open door the way people look at miracles they do not trust. Grateful, ready to run. "Come in," she said, "but don't drip on the rug. It's a terrible rug, but it's mine." Cyan stayed by the machines, eyes everywhere, the way a cat stands in the doorway between two rooms and refuses to declare allegiance. I stepped into the kitchen. The air turned into the air of that year, a barely suppressed sweetness of ripening fruit, a ghost of burned toast, a scent I couldn't name that lived in the threshold between panic and dinner. "You brought me to you," I said, which sounded like an accusation and felt like a thank you. "No one brings anyone to anyone," she said. "We make doors where our hands know how." She stood and did that thing mothers do with their eyes, where they pretend they are measuring your height against a mark on the doorframe. But what they are doing is counting the ways you could be lost and then deciding to let you go anyway, because holding would be a different kind of drowning. "The letter," I said, and placed it on the table. "The card. Leon." She smiled in a way that made her mouth younger. "He was very sure you would hear him this time." "He died," I said. "Not out of cruelty, but because the word remains the one anchor in a flood of possibilities, and I needed ballast." "He left," she said, and it wasn't denial. It was a category. Some departures make more noise than others. Behind me, Cyan pressed a button on the reel-to-reel. The machine sighed like an old soprano warming up. Tape ran, and the room's silence stood up straighter as if a new supervisor had entered. My mother sat back down and patted the chair opposite, the ritual of a family dinner where the food is the conversation. "Rules," I said, "because I am that person. You said you'd stop." "I will," she said. "But here's the last one that matters. Rule 9. The captions in this room are yours. You can change them. You can't decide how anyone reads. And in the other space, call it the nave, the warehouse, the choir." Cyan had found a headset large enough to be mistaken for a hat. She lifted it like a crown, examined the ear cups, placed it over her ears without looking for guidance. The tape ran. A voice swelled. It was mine, older than I am now and somehow braver, saying things I had said only in the dark to a ceiling that did not believe in me. "Don't listen to her yet," my mother said quickly, as if she had caught me reading a diary in which I played all the parts. "Talk to me. Then you can talk to the person you might be and have morning dawn." "What's the bruise?" I asked, because it was easier than asking why she had waited a year to pull me through a door. She reached up to her throat instinctively, then smiled when she realized she was not the one with the mark. "There are noises in the world that demand to be recognized," she said. "When you ignore them, they insist." "I didn't ignore it," I said. "I heard it." "You heard it like a person paid to hear," she said. "There's a difference." I wanted to be offended. Offense is an excellent way to avoid shame, but she was right. And the shame, when it arrived, was not corrosive. It was cleansing, like a river that refuses to let you keep your shoes on. "You think I've been translating the quiet into content," I said. "I think you've been practicing believing that you are not allowed to be the animal you are," she said. "So, when the sound knocked, you asked if it needed a ticket." Cyan laughed from the other room. It was not a happy laugh. It was recognition repackaged as comedy. "The tape has a transcript," she called, "and the transcript is wrong on purpose. Don't trust the captions," my mother and I said together, and then looked at each other in that surprise you feel when a mirrored movement is evidence rather than accident. "Okay," I said. "Tell me then, what is this place?" "A harmonic," my mother said. "The space between a thing and its echo when both are willing." "I thought harmonics were the part of a sound that makes it richer," I said, grateful for a words dictionary wearing a coat too big for its occupation. "They are," she said, "and they are also where you can hear everything that was left out when a life made itself presentable." Cyan stood in the doorway, the headset draped around her neck like an animal that had decided to love her against its own principles. "It's like a switchboard," she said. "You patch one silence into another, and the world starts to answer itself." "Who built it?" I asked, because I had to try to make this architecture belong to an architect. "Who put a door in my laundry room wall?" "Everyone," my mother said, "and no one. And the part of you that was tired of pretending a hallway is either forward or back." She stood, crossed to a drawer, and pulled out a small key. It was not a metaphorical key, which is a phrase only people with nothing to lose use. It was brass, old, missing a tooth. She placed it in my palm. "Your father wanted to throw this away after Leon left," she said. "He said he was tired of my superstitions. He liked the ones that fit on bills." She laughed lightly, forgiving him in a way I could not. "I kept it. I thought you might want to tell a door how to take you home." "What does it open?" I asked. "It opens enough," she said. On the reel-to-reel, my older voice, let's call her, after was saying, "You could have continued indefinitely. You could have died in a chair pretending to call it a job, but you learned a new knock, and your hands remembered their teeth." Cyan slipped a finger under the tape to slow it. After's voice dropped in pitch, turned into a cavern. "The recording responds to touch," Cyan said, delighted. "You can make yourself older by petting the past." "Play it forward," my mother said gently. "We have time and also none." I put the key in my pocket, on the side where I keep receipts until they begin to feel like confessions. My mother closed her hand around my wrist. Her hand was both narrower and stronger than I remembered. "I am not asking you to come home," she said. "There is no home but the one you carry. I am asking you to stop confusing stewardship with service." "Isn't that all jobs?" I said, and then hated myself for sounding like a person who uses resignation as a training regimen. She tilted her head. Maybe, she said. Or maybe that's the caption someone wrote so that our hunger wouldn't bankrupt the company store. Something in the nave shifted then, the way a building does when wind convinces it to remember it was once trees. A murmur traveled across the shallow water like a school of fish that had received a memo. Cyan stiffened, touched her throat. The bruise had darkened. There it is, she said. The announcement. What announcement? I asked. The call, she said. And when she said call, the word meant many things at once. Invitation, vocation, telephone, cry, the way a bird organizes its day. From the far end of the space, a shape approached. I had learned by now that shapes are untrustworthy narrators. This one insisted on being a person as it drew near. He walked the way Leon walked when he was late on purpose. Body pitched forward just enough to be efficient, not enough to be guilty. He wore a jacket that didn't fit his current weather. He had grown into his cheekbones without losing his kindness. He was not wet. He was not dry. He was not dead. He was the problem you can love because you know it never meant to be a problem. You waited, he said. His voice is the one you hear across a field and recognize by what it does to your stomach. Cyan bowed her head like someone acknowledging a monarch with a shared addiction. My mother did not stand. She folded her hands around her mug like the one who knows what the next chapter costs. I almost didn't, I said, and the word almost had its old power. I wanted to run to him. I wanted to make a show of walking slowly so the reunion could be a performance audited by none. I did neither. I stood like the hinge between two behaviors. Nearly, he read from the nameplate on the freestanding door, amused. Of course you would get a door whose caption is an apology. The bell wherever it lived now. Skull or chest or shins struck once. Then once again. Then waited as if trying to understand whether this rhythm differed meaningfully from the rhythms that had brought me this far. Leon held his hands out, palms up, and I had the exact impulse frogs must have when the air tells them it's time. I wanted to sing, "Is that?" Cyan began, and I finished for her because I was tired of pretending that naming things is a betrayal when it is sometimes a hug. Yes, Leon, he was pro-dancer. He turned to her and smiled the smile he reserved for strangers and children and feral cats. And your Cyan, he said, my condolences and congratulations. She blinked. How I watched you mouth a name, he said. I recognized the shape. He approached the table and the two chairs. He touched the back of one and then didn't sit because sometimes sitting is an admission that you accept an offered script. He looked at the reel-to-reel, the cassette recorder, the door. You brought her through, he said to my mother. She brought herself, my mother said. I just reminded her we had a house rule about shoes. He was saved. He looked at me then, the way people look at maps, just before realizing they are upside down. I came to ask you to leave, he said, and to stay. Whichever you choose, I'll agree in the language that makes you strong. For where? I asked. Leave what? Stay where? The Echo Farm, he said, and his mouth did not ruin the phrase by smirking. The job you've mistaken for a room, the room you've mistaken for a future, leave it if you can stop yourself from narrating your suffering as a duty. Stay if you can change the captions without asking for permission. Cyan swayed, caught herself on the door like a dancer who refuses applause. What about me? She asked. What am I meant to do? I have the kind of face that thinks it's a message. Your bruise, my mother said, speaking to Cyan for the first time, as if naming is adoption. It's a phrase you didn't agree to say, written on your skin by a mouth that calls itself a platform. Cyan touched the mark. How do I erase it? She asked. You don't, Leon said. You turn it into a rating that only you can read. When it hurts, you adjust the exposure. The exposure to what? She asked. To other people's need, he said, without judgment. The water underfoot quivered. The blue seam along the base of the walls glowed, then dimmed, then returned to a steady pulse. The announcement that Cyan had named gathered itself, concentrated, and dropped into the space like a coin into a perfectly engineered slot. The effect was immediate and biological. My heart changed pace. The hair on my arms rose, as if to become receiving antennae. The room grew taller and closer at the same time. The knock rode in on a frequency low enough to move furniture. 3, pause, 3, pause, 2. What's 2? I asked absurdly, as if a number had to apologize for its own integrity. Decision, my mother said. Or a kindness you don't recognize as one yet. Leon stepped to the freestanding door, the one with my word for a name. He did not touch the knob. He put his hand against the wood, the way one might press a palm to a chest. He closed his eyes. You ask it to be a path, he said, not a product. I put my hand next to his. We were two criminals trying to reassure a bank vault that love was the motive. The wood warmed. The water around the threshold eddied. Like doing math I didn't learn in school. The tape on the reel-to-reel kept running, saying something about years that I didn't need because I had begun to taste time the way you taste metal before rain. Dolly will escalate you, Cyan said suddenly, her voice flat, reporting. Help desk will write a ticket for you with your name spelled wrong so you don't recognize your own file. The comments will claim you abandoned them, and some will thank you, and some will ask for merch. Is that your way of telling me to hurry? I asked, not unkindly. It's my way of telling you you're already late, she said, not unkindly. Late is a word I know how to collude with. It makes you spicy and helpless. It makes you feel important in your failure, which is a mood the internet sells as a limited edition. I looked at my mother, who had committed to sitting for this entire scene as if she were the audience I deserved. I looked at Leon, who had died and then arrived, and then told me to pick my own definition of the word leaving. I looked at Cyan, whose bruise had the ugliness of truth, whose laugh refused to be a tax write-off. I won't save the world, I said, practicing a sentence in a new key. But I won't be its content. Good, my mother said. That's the only rule I didn't write down. The door trembled once, like a horse eager to be better than its rider. I opened it, not with the knob, with the part of my body that has always known when a room is kind and when a room plans to eat me. The space beyond was the same nave, the same shallow, the same columns, but the dimensions shifted by a hand's breadth, as if all this time we had been mismeasuring the room with a tape that lied because it wanted to be liked. In the far wall, not where we entered, a second seam had opened. It marched up the cinder block like a healed wound. The water did not flow out. The two knocks did not come. It was simply there, available, the way a possibility waits while you exhaust yourself with the performance of refusal. Where does that go? Cyan asked, a child in a museum refusing to be bored. Back, Leon said, and forward, and around. He looked at me. To the building you live in that didn't know you were alive. Not in people. What happens when I go through? I asked, because making the obvious into a question is one of the last luxuries. You get to do your job like you own it, he said, or you burn it and teach your hands another trade. I'll come with you either way as long as coming with you doesn't mean dying again in the same season." He looked older then, truly, not romantically. He looked like a person who understands that repetition is the cruelest teacher. I wanted to kiss him, and I did not, because the kiss would have been a caption, and I was trying to learn how to trust the image. "Are you ready?" my mother asked. Not the way a dentist asks before a drill, but the way a midwife asks between contractions, because she knows the answer is always yes, and also, "Don't make me." "I'm not," I said. "But I'm going." Cyan took off the headset and hung it on the door as if returning a crown to a museum after a country has asked politely for its things back. She took my hand. It felt like holding the head of a river. We crossed the shallow again. The painted lines under the water sang when our feet disturbed them, and for a second I understood why people drown, not because they cannot breathe, but because another medium offers to carry their name, and they confuse that offer with an inheritance. At the seam, I hesitated the way you must before you step off a curb you didn't see, because you were composing an email in your head apologizing for having a body that needs lunch. "Remember," my mother said, "Rule 10. "There is no Rule 10, I said, alarmed, and then laughed because of course that was the point. There never was. I knocked anyway, because ceremony is a language even when it's unnecessary. The seam obeyed. The wall said yes. We went through. The laundry room took us back the way a sleepy host takes your coat without remembering your name. The machines were still performing their old arias. Someone had taped a new notice to the board. "Lost time if found, please text." The ink bled where the thumb had been sweaty. The blue seam under the baseboard had not disappeared. It had only learned discretion. Cyan and I stood dripping into thin puddles. My phone lay against my ear, an anchor. "I'm here," my mother said in a voice you save for waking someone on the couch. "I'll be where you need me to be when you need me to be there. If I'm not, knock." "I know," I said. "I will." We climbed the stairs. On the second-floor landing, the exit sign hummed gossip. On the third floor, the carpet's blue seam shone briefly like an underwater power line, then hid outside my door. A package waited for a neighbor who doesn't live here yet. The hallway bulb flickered in time with a heartbeat, then chose steadiness. I unlocked my door with a key, too, used to be proud of itself. Inside, my apartment, the same white with faint gray where someone else had believed in posters. The coffee maker hissed in a parody of activity. On the laptop, the queue had not paused in deference. The new thumbnails were ready with their inscrutable acts of intimacy. My chat blinked. "BY Artie, you okay?" "Help desk. Resolved. Dolly. Marry and calibrate." Cyan went to the window and peered at the parking lot as if it owed her a secret. "You know what they'll do if you don't show up," she said. "I know," I said. "They'll call me a variable." "Which is another word for person," she said, and the relief in her voice was small and sufficient. Saturday, I put on the good headphones that were not mine and I pulled the company portal into a smaller window and opened a new one beside it, the kind of half-crime that makes a bureaucrat shudder without knowing why. I formatted a letter to myself in a file no one owned and everyone could find if they knew how to knock inside a computer. I titled it, "Captions to be Distrusted." I wrote Rule 9 again to see if it held. The captions in this room are yours. I clicked on the first video, a woman crying without sound, the caption, "Don't watch if you're fragile." I changed the caption to, "If you're fragile, you're accurate." I hit allow, then duplicated the action on a flag labeled experiment. I clicked the second video, a hallway empty of actors, the caption, "We're not alone." I changed it to, "We're alone and still plural." The system froze, offended, then thawed, cunning. Help desk typed, "We're detecting unsanctioned edits." Dolly pinged, "Marion?" She didn't finish the sentence because punctuation had never been meant to save me. I replied in the chat with the steadiness I borrow from my mother when the pot boils over, calibrating with context. "Please escalate my variance to wellness," tagged Harmonics. BYRD sent the ear with wings emoji and then, for the first time, words, "I hear it too." Cyan sat on the floor and crossed her legs like a child waiting for the part in a story where the dragon decides to grow a garden. She looked up at me. The bruise at her throat had paled at the edges, as if the body had decided to negotiate. "What do we do tomorrow?" she asked. "We knock," I said. "We keep our names small and our hands honest. We refuse to be a room. We refuse to be a product." "And Leon?" she asked. "Leon comes when the knock deserves him," I said, and believed it because believing it felt like folding a spine into courage. Outside, the lamp in the parking lot stayed on because it doesn't know that sometimes night wants to do the talking. The baby downstairs cried once, the way babies test whether the world is the world. A neighbor laughed at a video with the sound on. On my laptop, the queue refreshed and presented a thumbnail of a door with a blue line stitched under it. The caption read, "Knock 3 times if you're late, but Esmar." I changed it to, "Knock once if you're ready." Then I hit play. Chapter 5. Postscript in a minor key. Morning didn't arrive so much as permit itself to be considered. The parking lot lamp still burned, a sedentary star refusing to admit defeat by sunrise. Cyan snored once and denied it immediately by not snoring again. I had fallen asleep in the chair with the good headphones, making my ears feel like they were being cupped by a listener I deserved. The laptop's fan ran a soft, worried monologue. Someone in the stairwell dropped a key that announced itself as evidence. I woke to a notification that didn't belong to any app I had installed. 1 sound, then 3, then 2. The screen displayed a sentence, the way a throat displays regret. "You are now a variable." Under it, smaller, "Wellness has been notified." "Wellness," Cyan said from the floor, eyes already open, as if sleep for her was a tab she never closed, just pushed behind the others. "I love it when they name punishment after health." "We asked them to," I said, which was accurate and ugly. "We asked to be managed gently." "So they smother," she said, and fiddled with the string on her hoodie until it made the shape of a noose that wasn't a noose because we were pretending this was just a garment. The chat blinked. BYRD, their auditing caption edits said your variance caused a downstream. Help desk. For users experiencing personalized messaging, consider stepping away from your device. Dolly, Marion, join Wellness Stand Up, please. She had added, "Please, a knife with a Band-Aid." I typed, "I'm calibrating in the field." I didn't wait for permission because I had learned permission is often a way to keep responsibility asleep. I stood, and the room remembered it was shaped like a place you could leave. Cyan rose with me. The bruise at her throat had turned the yellow of certain flowers that bloom in ditches without asking for an audience. We didn't speak of leaving or staying. We carried both in our pockets like twin keys we would never use at the same lock. We went to the stairwell because elevators perform a bureaucratic theater I was tired of applauding. On the second floor, the exit sign hummed a note that made the fillings in my teeth consider unionizing. On the first floor, a neighbor shuffled by with a bag of laundry that could have been weapons or clouds. He nodded, then didn't. The choreography of a city that knows too much to perform intimacy every time it's asked. Outside, the air was the color of precautions. The street was an agreement to pretend asphalt is natural. A truck backed up with the diplomacy of a whale practicing parallel parking. In the distance, a siren rehearsed for a catastrophe it hoped to avoid. Cyan and I walked like we were not in a hurry but had somewhere to be. My phone warmed against my palm. It had ideas about what was urgent. Where first? Cyan asked. You choose, I said, and meant it. Her face softened, then braced. She pointed toward the small square of Municipal Park 2 blocks over where someone had installed a fountain that wanted to be a god when it grew up. There, she said, tiles, echoes like tile. We stopped at the corner where the crosswalk button did what crosswalk buttons do, performed effort. I didn't press it. We crossed on a gap. In the park, morning acted like a person learning to use its indoor voice. The fountain sputtered, then remembered it was meant to be consistent. Children hung from monkey bars with the wounded magnetism of planets. A woman in a suit talked to her watch. An elderly man fed pigeons his feelings, reduced to crumbs. At the fountain's base, the tile was cracked in a pattern that would have been a map if it had more ambition. Cyan knelt and traced one crack with a finger, the way you trace a scar to convince yourself you're not afraid of it. Knock, she said, without a smile this time, because names are better when they're verbs. I looked around for law, for a uniform, for a sign that said, keep off, and then discovered the part of myself that used to climb roofs still had its shoes on. I knelt and knocked 3 times on the tile. The sound carried into the water like a question falling in love with an answer. Pigeons lifted, their wings beating a rhythm that pretended to be applause. Somewhere under the fountain, the knock returned. It was thinner here, filtered, honest. Cyan shivered like a dog seeing snow for the first time in a story it was told about itself. That's it, she whispered. That's the phrase. An old woman sat on a bench and watched us with the derision leisure reserves for urgency. She had hair like a field of music and a cane that looked like it remembered better parties. She raised it once, as if to scratch the air. You'll catch something, she called. We already did, Cyan said, not unkindly. Good, the woman said. It's the only way to stop treating sickness like a sport. A notification slid across my phone's lock screen, the way guilt slides across a dream. Wellness. Your meeting begins in 9 minutes. Attending is mandatory but optional. Under that, a calendar entry that populated itself without my consent. Mindful captions together, we translate. Location, virtual, presenter, D0LLY. Together, Cyan said over my shoulder, reading my least favorite Democratic lie. I'll attend, I said. Will you? She said. Yes, I said. By not attending, she grinned. I love oppositions that tuck themselves in. We sat on the fountain lip because we were tired and because we wanted to be the kind of people who sit on fountain lips without asking the fountain's permission to hold us up. I opened the company portal on my phone and found the meeting link. I did not click. I opened a different link, the one I had created in a fit of midnight insubordination, captions to be distrusted. 3 people were in the file: me, a string of numbers that belonged to help desk bot, and a new anonymous animal named Chipmunk. The chipmunk was already typing. If captions are ours here, then I want to practice writing the kind I don't know. I typed back, "Practice is a door if you knock." The cursor blinked like a tired heart. A paragraph populated itself, not mine, a collage of sentences that wanted to be a to-do list. We will not apologize for hearing. We will not apologize for changing what we called something when we were scared. We will sign our names small so the paper can still breathe. It wasn't good. It was necessary. Cyan took my phone. She recorded 30 seconds of the fountain's hush. She added it to the file. A waveform appeared, humble and bright. Helpdesk bot wrote, "External audio attachments not recommended. This may result in unexpected behaviors." BYRD joined and wrote, "Is this the right place to put wrong sounds?" I replied with the ear with wings emoji, "Which is how you bless chaos when you're busy." Across the square, a child cried with the purity only the under 5 and the middle-aged can achieve. His mother crouched, lowered her face until it was in his weather. "Use your words," she said, meaning be comprehensible. He screamed again, meaning I am. Cyan flinched. Her hand went to her throat like checking for a name tag. The bruise darkened, then lightened, as if considering its options. "I want to go to the pond," I said stupidly, because there was no pond in this city that was ours. She nodded. "Me too," she said, meaning a place that listens all the way through. We left the park without a ceremony. The morning had got on with its job without us. We walked to the bus stop because cars were for people who needed the world to be an extension of their living rooms. The bus arrived with an apology. We sat in the long back seat where teenagers practiced their faces. The driver kept the radio low, a murmured AMA with a cardiologist who was very polite about the heart's impatience with metaphors. I pulled up a map. There was a blue shape the size of a reasonable lie 20 minutes away, labeled Municipal Reservoir, no swimming. It would do. Cyan rested her head against the smeared window and watched the city invent reasons to continue. We disembarked into a neighborhood whose yards were still expecting children who had already learned screens were easier than each other. The path to the reservoir was marked by a sign that tried to be both stern and inviting. The water itself was a quiet sheet, pretending not to know the concept of thirst. Cattails at the far edge performed their old duty. Frogs considered lawsuits. We stood at the chain-link fence that explained itself with rusty conviction. Cyan shook the fence once. It replied with a complaint that could be translated as, "I was here before your story decided I was in the way." She reached through and touched the air on the reservoir side. "Colder," she said, delighted inexplicably. I knocked on the fence post with my knuckles. The sound went in and out, came back thinner. The blue seam, if it existed here, lived under the field, under the engineer's signatures, under the city's need to perform cleanliness. I knocked again. The water made a decision to be a mirror. My phone thrummed. "Dolly, we missed you at Mindful Captions." A second later, "Please join me for a one-on-one. I want to make sure you feel supported." A link, a calendar invite, a gif of a kitten escaping a paper bag, which in some circles passes for human contact. Cyan read and mimed vomiting, then apologized to the grass. "What if you went?" she said. "What if I did?" I said. "It would be the first time we let them reassure us and didn't pay them for the privilege, she said. But sure, knock first. I accepted the invite because resistance needs data. The video window opened on my phone. Dolly's face, almost symmetrical enough to belong to a religion, smiled with appropriate concern. Her background blurred in the way that says, "My house is a liability." "Marion," she said, "I'm so glad you made time." "Of course," I said, bland as bread. "I wanted to check in about the variants," she said. "You've been making creative edits to captions in what appears to be an attempt to reduce harm. We love the intent. We need alignment on execution." "You're saying keep the harm and lose the attempt," I said, with a kindness she didn't deserve, but I offered anyway because cruelty is an expensive spice. She blinked, calibrating. "We're saying we have processes," she said. "Users depend on consistency." "Users depend on honesty," I said. "Consistency is a sermon, not a service." She did the small sigh managers do when they realize they're going to have to file a ticket. "Let me put it differently," she said. "We noticed you engaged in an unsanctioned resource, a shared file. Wellness appreciates initiative, but it's important that internal feelings don't become external policy." I turned the phone so she could see the reservoir. The wind scrolled its small hand over the water. What if external policy started modeling internal feelings? I asked. What if captions admitted they were hypotheses? That would create confusion, she said. That would create conversation, I said. Conversations don't scale, she said. Neither does grief, I said. Yet here we are. She was quiet for a heartbeat that could have been empathy or a loading spinner. "We value you," she said, and the tense was mean. "We value what you bring. We don't want to lose you to experiments." "My job is an experiment," I said. "The variable is whether I let it grow me." She smiled. "Professional regret." "Would you consider a sabbatical?" she asked. "To recalibrate. We can freeze your position. We can unfreeze you later." It was a good offer if you believed time is money. It was a trap if you believed time is a medium. "I'll consider," I said, which is a sentence that pays attention for both parties. She nodded. The nod of a person who will email you a document with bullet points. "In the meantime," she said, "no more unsanctioned edits. If you need to change a caption, route it to me. I'll escalate appropriately." I ended the call because escalation in her mouth meant burial. Cyan took the phone, turned it over, handed it back as if she were returning a bird that didn't know it was injured. "What now?" she asked. "Now we listen," I said. "Then we write. Then we refuse." "To what?" she said. "To pretend," I said. We walked the fence line, found a gap where someone with a bolt cutter had done holy work months ago. We squeezed through. The grass on the reservoir side was taller, uninterested in training humans' ankles. We went to the water's lip and stood as if we had been rehearsing this composition all our lives. The cattails approved by doing nothing. I took the key from my pocket. It was warmer than I expected. Keys should be cool, because that's how we know they belong to metal. This one had been learning body. I didn't know what to unlock. That was the point. I threw it lightly into the reservoir, a ritual of sacrilege, and watched as it made a small hole in the mirror and then became a fish's anecdote. Cyan inhaled as if I had thrown money away. Then she nodded. "Good," she said. "You owe the elder waters." We sat on the bank. The earth was damp enough to remember things, but not so damp as to insist on them. I closed my eyes and listen the way you listen to someone you love when you have hurt them and need to be told how. The knock came, the same rhythm, the same kindness. Each time it arrived anywhere now it felt like a thing I had taught the world to say back. It was arrogant to think that it was necessary to act like it was true. Leon's voice threaded itself through the air, not from the reservoir, not from the phone, not from memory's false witnesses, just present. "Are you late?" he asked, amused. "If you are, you're on time." "I'm ready," I said, and the word didn't taste like a lie. "Good," he said. "I've been beyond, and I've been inside, and I prefer the door." But he asked, "What's beyond?" I asked, because there are questions even the brave cannot avoid. "Another room," he said, "with worse lighting, with better quiet." "And inside?" Cyan asked, surprised to hear herself eligible. "A library that teaches you to write with your bones," he said. "I want that one," she said. "You can have both," he said. "You just can't have them at once." We didn't speak for a while. Pigeons negotiated territory with low bureaucracy. The old woman from the park had somehow made her way here and sat on a bench that existed for no one until she claimed it. The son decided to propose, then postponed. My phone vibrated with an email subject line that felt like a diagnosis. "Action required. Your performance plan." I flipped the phone and used it as a coaster for a cup I didn't have. "Tell me," I said to the air that pretended it didn't know it was listening. "If I quit, if I stay, if I burn it and build something, what changes?" "You," my mother said, and I didn't know where she was, and that was perfect. And then the thing that relies on you resisting yourself will have to find a new supplier. The wind pushed the cattails, and they drew themselves as commas against the sky. Cyan lay back on the grass with the laziness of the industrious. "Write the rules," she said from her new perspective. "Not for me, for you. Put them somewhere nobody can delete them. Treat them like a song." I tilted my head so my ear could knock against the soil. I wanted to write something for which paper would be embarrassed. I spoke them instead, because speaking forces a body. "Rule 1, I said. "If a door has my name, I won't go alone. If I go alone, I won't say my name. If I say my name, I won't believe the first person who answers." Cyan smiled at the sky. "Rule 2, she said. "I won't correct captions written by rooms not built for me." "Rule 3, I said. "I will knock on everything I'm told is solid." "Rule 4, she said. "I'll leave before comfort teaches me not to hear." "Rule 5, I said. "I'll translate harm without letting translation be the harm." "Rule 6, she said. "I'll let late be the adverb and not the plot." "Rule 7, I said. "If I meet myself, I'll treat her like a sibling I can love without becoming." "Rule 8, she said. "If I shake, I'll mean it." "Rule 9, I said. "The captions in this room are mine. I'll change them, and I won't be surprised when the room resists." We waited for Rule 10 to drop like a punchline. It didn't. We laughed, rescued. The reservoir kept its secrets with the dignity of old gods who have mistaken retirement for cruelty. I opened my eyes. The world did not flash a badge. It presented its daily arms and asked what we planned to lift. On the bus ride back, a teenager played a song out loud from a speaker with no shame. The song was all bass and confession, a list of dead friends and expensive shoes. An older man glared, then stopped, then nodded, then tapped a foot, then looked out the window as if betrayed. Cyan swayed. I closed my eyes and let the bus make my body into a pendulum. In the sway, a sentence arrived and sat down. We will allow our jobs to make money. We will not allow them to make meaning. At home, the ceiling fan performed modestly. The coffee maker admitted defeat. The queue waited like an altar with too many candles. I sat intending to do something irreversible. The chat had moved on without me in the way chats do. New threads, a link to a news story about a man who live-streamed himself swallowing a light bulb, a thread titled Policy Update, new prohibited phrases with a list that included knock, echo, harmonic, pond, nearly sensitive terms. Cyan read over my shoulder. They're learning. So are we, I said. Help desk pinged me privately. I'm not supposed to, but your variance is protected for 2 weeks. Someone put a note on your file. The note says, necessary experiment. Do not cage. Also, for your information, Wellness wants to interview your mother. End of ends. We have they say. I typed back, she's not a contractor. Help desk replied with a gif of a dog eating its own leash. The bot had jokes when it wanted to. BYRD wrote in the shared file, I told my wife about the knock. She said, it's the drum our grandparents hid under the floorboards. The chipmunk wrote, in my country we clap the air twice between speeches so the spirits can comment. I wrote, let's put these in the captions where they can turn users into authors. We began to. Slowly, carefully. We changed, don't watch if you're fragile, to, this is the part where we get precise. We changed, you won't believe what happens next, to, you can believe or not. It will still happen, and you can still choose. We changed, proof we are all in the same dream, to, we were awake together briefly. We kept the worst things, and we also refused to be vendors for them. We escalated with new tags. Not a trend, someone's child. Ask them first. The system complained in the low-register systems reserve for the moment they realize their captains are the storm. Dolly scheduled another one-on-one. I accepted and then sent her a calendar decline in the caption field of a video about a dog that could open refrigerators. Declining to be managed does not mean declining to be accountable, I wrote. I will meet you in the stairwell at 3:11. At 3:11, I knocked in the stairwell. The wall returned it. Dolly arrived in person in a suit that had opinions. She looked tired in a way that meant she had stayed up late writing policy in a Google Doc that would never satisfy the ghost that asked to be fed. She stood 2 steps below me and said my name in 3 syllables the way the bell did when it wanted to be indulgent. I smiled at her because even managers are being managed by silence. You're going to make this hard, she said. I'm going to make this honest, I said. We will lose things, she said. A confession. We already did, I said. A bomb. She nodded. A human nod. Then start with this, she said. The way someone hands you a wrench when they realize you intend to fix the sink, whether or not you've ever fixed a sink. Policy is not a door. Change it with a knock, not a bomb. I laughed. Rule 11, I said. There was no Rule 10, she said. And I saw for a moment the girl she must have been who wanted to do right so hard she swallowed other people's wrongs until they looked like her posture. We wrote together that night, Dolly and I in different rooms, in the same file, with Cyan editing phrases that bent towards sentiment and making them stand like fences that don't decide who deserves pasture. Help desk flagged every 3rd sentence with a warning we learned to ignore. BYRD added a footnote about drums that became the preamble. The chipmunk replaced every occurrence of user with person. The system auto-corrected to user with a capital U. We corrected it back. It auto-corrected. We decided to let the fight stand as an annotation. At some point, Leon texted from a number that didn't have numbers, a message that displayed as a knock and then as a sentence. You will forget, and then you will remember, and both will be holy. I deleted and then kept it by not pressing any button at all. Cyan fell asleep on the rug with her head under the chair, as if protection is a geometry. The bruise at her throat had faded to the memory of a command that learned manners. I watched her breathe. I knocked my name smaller and smaller under my tongue until it became a seed I could plant anywhere. I opened a final video before declaring myself done for the day. The thumbnail was a door, of course. The caption, "Leave a message after the tone." I changed it to, "Say it now." I hit allow. I closed the laptop. The room did not applaud. The room accepted me. Outside, the lamp in the parking lot finally chose to sleep. Night carried itself with less performative menace. Somewhere, my mother washed a mug and set it upside down on a towel with the tenderness people reserve for objects that have seen them ugly. Somewhere, Dolly told someone above her that morale was a room you could build out of verbs. Somewhere, Help Desk's bot wrote a haiku by accident and took no pride in it. Somewhere, BYRD learned to sleep without the ear with wings emoji. Somewhere, the chipmunk led a meeting where no one sat and everyone listened. In my apartment, the knock presented itself on a gentle schedule I could endure. 3, pause. 3, pause. 2, I replied. The echo, the harmonic. "Are you there yet?" the old voice asked, familiar and automated and mine. "Nearly," I said, telling the truth and the style. "And enough." The silence said, "Go." I did not move. I didn't have to.